Welcome to the African History Podcast, brought to you by African Campfire Stories. Our website is www.africancampfirestories.com. We are available on platforms such as iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Please help to create more awareness of African history by sharing this podcast with friends. Christmas and Hanukkah Special, Episode 5, Date of Christmas. This is the fifth installment of the Christmas and Hanukkah Special. Today, we will continue with our story on the history of Christianity and how Christianity spread to Africa. But we will do that only for the first 5 or so minutes, because it is around Christmas time, the second part of the episode, which is a very large part, we will talk about something that is directly related to this time of the year. And that something is the date for celebrating Christmas. To be more specific, we will seek to answer the question, how was the date for celebrating Christmas decided upon? We will look at both the 25th of December and also the other date. Yes, there is another date, the 7th of January. We have already discussed Hanukkah in some detail on the series, but we haven't talked directly about Christmas yet. We began this series in December of 2019 with the intention of doing 2 or 3 episodes covering the history of Christianity and how Christianity spread into Africa. But since Christianity comes from Judaism, and it was around the time of Hanukkah when we began the series, we decided that to do justice to the discussion about Christianity, we had to start with the history of Judaism. This made sense because the other major religion in Africa, Islam, was also greatly influenced by Judaism. And we know that we have to cover the history of Islam in the future too. This series has now taken epic proportions. For instance, in the last installment, we provided a summary of how Christianity spread to Europe. We felt we had to do that because a large chunk of Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, converted to Christianity during the colonial era. That is, the era when those parts of Africa were under European rule. Areas in the north of Africa and those in the Red Sea, Horn of Africa, Nile River area converted to Christianity very early in the development of the Christian religion. For instance, in Egypt, Christianity arrived in the 1st century AD or CE. For Ethiopia, it was the 4th century AD or CE. North African figures like Tertullian, Perpetua, Felicity, Clement of Alexandria, Origen of Alexandria, Cyprian, Athanasius, and Augustine of Hippo contributed immensely to the development of Christianity. Hippo was located in modern-day Algeria. Alexandria was, and still is, in Egypt. North Africans were very involved in the early debates about the nature of Christ and Christianity. We have covered some of these debates in the previous installments of this series, including the debates tackled at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD or CE. Please note that from now on this episode, we are going to use only CE instead of both CE and AD, as we have been doing up to this point. People like Arius, of whom Arianism is attributed, were actively preaching and writing about a competing form of Christianity from Alexandria in the 3rd and the 4th centuries CE. His views were defeated at the Council of Nicaea and became anathema to the official Christian orthodoxy of that time. Arius wasn't alone in taking a differing view from the Christian mainstream. There were other dissenting figures like Marcion, who was excommunicated from the Church of Rome in 144 CE. The adoption of Christianity in Ethiopia is another key moment in the development of Christianity in Africa. We've touched on Ethiopia's religious history on this series, and we will continue to do so on future episodes, including expanding on the history of Judaism and Christianity in Ethiopia. In future episodes, we will continue tracing the journey that Christianity took, from its founding in the Holy Land all the way to its prominence in Africa, a prominence it shares with Islam, to be sure. As promised, for the rest of today's episode, we will discuss the date on which Jesus Christ was born. Why does a big chunk of the world celebrate Christmas on the 25th of December? Why do the Eastern Orthodox churches celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January? The first recorded Christmas celebration was held in Rome on the 25th of December on the year 336 CE. The month and the date of the birth of Jesus Christ are not clearly known. However, in the early 300s CE, the founding fathers of the Christian church fixed the date as being the 25th of December. This is what the church father Clement of Alexandria said about the issue of the date of Christmas around 200 CE. Open quote. They say that it took place in the 28th year of Augustus and in the 25th day of the Egyptian month of Marcion. Close quote. Note that the 25th day of Marcion is May 20th in the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar is the internationally most used form of secular calendar in the world today. All dates in this series, for instance, are expressed in Gregorian calendar form. More details on the Gregorian calendar are provided later on in this episode. The 28th year of Augustus means the 28th year of Roman Emperor Augustus's reign, which is approximately 2 CE in the Gregorian calendar. The quote from Clement continues. Open quote. Others say that he was born on the 24th or the 25th of Parmuti. Close quote. Parmuti is April 20th or 21st in the Gregorian calendar. The above quotes are from the time before the early Christian church had agreed on the date and month in the early 300s CE. From the quotes, you can deduce that Clement himself, though a very influential figure in the early church, wasn't sure of the date. But what about the other founding fathers of Christianity? Let's look at the staunch and widely respected heavyweights of church founders: Irenaeus, Tertullian, Origen, and Arnobius. Christmas celebrations, or the Christmas Holy Day, do not appear on the lists of festivals given by the early Christian writers Irenaeus and Tertullian. Origen and Arnobius claim in their writings and teachings that it is the pagans that celebrate birthdays. Historians believe that such statements mean that Christmas was not celebrated in their time, as they would not have slandered birthdays if they celebrated Christmas, as Christmas is in essence a birthday celebration. So, at least there is some strong evidence that Christmas was not being celebrated in the first 200 or so years of Christianity's existence. So, what considerations may have come into play when choosing the 25th of December as the date of celebrating Christmas? There are many theories that try to explain why the 25th of December was chosen. Each theory has its own supporters amongst historians, Christian scholars, and Christian clergy. However, it doesn't seem like anyone knows for sure what reasoning the church fathers used when choosing the date. We'll now discuss the different theories about the date of Christmas. One of the major theories about the date of Christmas is called the solstice date, or solstice hypothesis. This theory claims that the date of Christmas was linked to the Roman winter solstice celebrations, which took place approximately 9 months after March 25. March 25th is the date of the vernal equinox and a date linked to the conception of Jesus, or the Annunciation. The Annunciation is the celebration of the day on which the angel Gabriel made an announcement to Mary that she would bear a son, Jesus Christ. Scholars who do not agree with the solstice theory are quick to point out that calculating 9 months from March 25th gives more than one possible date for Christmas in December, thus meaning that, according to those dissenting scholars, the solstice theory still doesn't explain why it was the 25th of December that was chosen. The solstice theory has famous supporters like Saint Augustine, a famous and influential church father, and also, strangely enough, Isaac Newton, the famous scientist. Many or most Christians celebrate on December 25th in the Gregorian calendar. The Gregorian calendar has been adopted almost universally as the civil or secular calendar used in countries throughout the world. It is based on the solar dating system. It was proclaimed in 1582 by Pope Gregory XIII. and it was meant to fix the previous Julian calendar by reducing the length of the average year from 365.25 days to 365.2425 days. The Julian calendar had been established by the Roman ruler Julius Caesar in the 1st century BCE. The Eastern Orthodox churches celebrate Christmas on December 25th, but December 25th on the old Julian calendar, which means that, according to the Gregorian calendar, those churches celebrate Christmas on the 7th of January. Eastern Orthodox churches include the Greek Church, the Russian Church, and the Ethiopian Church. In the early Eastern churches, the birth of Jesus was celebrated as part of the Epiphany on January the 6th. But the date of January 6th wasn't about the birth of Jesus Christ. It was about his baptism. Since they don't know Jesus Christ's birth date, they decided to celebrate it on his baptism day. If you think about this, it isn't strange at all, as many Christians believe that being baptized signifies being born anew. So, metaphorically speaking, a person's baptism date is also his or her birth date. Then there is the theory that the date of the 25th of December comes from the pagan religion of Sol Invictus. Sol Invictus means unconquerable sun. This religion was created by the Roman Emperor Origen in 274 CE. to celebrate the fact that he had just reconquered the rebelling western and eastern parts of the Roman Empire and brought them back under the control of Rome. This theory claims that the early Christian church chose December 25th as a means of linking Christmas with the festivities held by the Romans in honor of the god Sol Invictus. Some historians do not agree with this theory. Those historians who agree with this state that the act of the early Christians taking an already existing religious holiday and using it as a Christian holiday was a par for the course in ancient times. This was a very common practice that occurred between religions all the time. The process actually has a name. It's called syncretism. It means the amalgamation of different religions, beliefs, cultures, and schools of thought. The last Christmas date theory we will look at is called the calculation hypothesis. It is slightly complicated. Should we leave you confused, you can Google this theory, and all the other theories for that matter, in order to get your own understanding. The calculation hypothesis suggests that an earlier holiday celebrated on March 25th became associated with the Incarnation. March 25th is equivalent to 14 Nisan, that is Passover, on the local calendar that was used. March 25 is celebrated as the day of Annunciation. Christmas was then calculated as being 9 months later. This is because of a Jewish tradition that held that men of great stature have the same date for both their birth and their death. It would have served us better if the church fathers wrote down or announced why they chose the 25th of December. As things stand now, for the past 1,500 years, Christian scholars have been forced to defend a date of which they don't know for sure how and why it was arrived at. This is the end of today's episode. Stay tuned for our next episode.